to revamp the talk and talk about the history of the Civil Affairs Branch of the Army. The Civil Affairs Branch has two origin stories. The first is around 1902, after the Spanish-American War, when we had these territories that needed administering: Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. And one of the origin stories is that the officers assigned to that pending civilian control formed the beginning of the Civil Affairs Branch of the Army. The second origin story is after World War II, when Germany and Japan were essentially on their knees insofar as administration, resources, and everything else. And the Army reached out to form these military government units to administer the areas in Germany and Japan and to help clean it up and get both areas back on their feet. The movie from that that depicts that era is Monuments Men. The Monuments Men movie depicts early civil affairs endeavors. But let's skip forward to the Korean War. In June 25th, 1950, the North Koreans staged a surprise attack on the South, and they just rolled up everything in front of them, down to a small area called the Pusan Perimeter, named for the second largest town in Korea, which is on the coast of Southeast Korea. And it was a military and humanitarian disaster. And General MacArthur called on his government administration people in Japan to come over and try to alleviate the civilian aspect of this catastrophe, while he organized a flanking movement invading the Incheon landing, which flanked the North Korean army at Incheon, which is the upper northwest part of South Korea. It pointed out the need to have an organization within the military to take care of the civilian aspect of war. And that was the actual birth of the Civil Affairs Branch of the Army, which was born in 1955. The motto of the Civil Affairs Branch is "Secure the Victory." Every Army unit, every Army branch has its own motto. As a medical corps, the motto is "Conserve the fighting strength." Sniper school, one shot, one kill. Infantry school, follow me. So the motto here is "Secure the Victory," which means you don't want to win the war and create a guerrilla force as a result of winning that war. We need to consider the civilian population in wartime. So the Civil Affairs mission statement, and I learned this because I was a medical officer in civil affairs, but I was not a civil affairs officer. The mission statement is, Civil Affairs Mission Statement, activities of a military force to minimize civilian interference and maximize civilian support for military operations. A civil affairs team will apply knowledge of civil populations and governments to affect human behavior and counter threats. Civil affairs soldiers are prepared to execute their assigned missions in politically sensitive, austere, remote, and non-permissive environments. And I'll tell you a story that when we were packing up to leave Panama after the Panama invasion back in 89, an officer came to us packing up and he said, "I have I have a mission for one of you. It involves going to Bolivia, and I have to tell you, it's cold, it's primitive. You won't be welcome. Uh, do I have any volunteers? And a friend of mine said, "Well, what's the downside?" Then that's kind of what we were doing. So let us turn that. I want to talk about Vietnam. It would be easy to write an Army field manual based on experiences in Vietnam. All you have to do is look at what we did in Vietnam and do the opposite. The first lesson learned is you don't invade a country to support a corrupt government that the population doesn't support. That was an easy lesson. The other lesson is that we had these civil affairs people and they weren't deployed until 1966. So, and then it was only one company. A company is 200 people for the entire country. They were given no logistics support. They were placed under a unified command, MACV, Military Assistance Command Vietnam, which was stationed in Saigon. And their mission was go out and win the hearts and minds. Win the hearts and minds. For a population that really was not only against us, but was against who we were supporting. On the other hand, I remember that the general attitude of the Army officer at the company and lower field grade was if you have them by the balls, their hearts and minds will follow. And that's what you were dealing with insofar as trying to carry out the mission that I described. One central part of that mission was the MedCap program. I don't know if anybody remembers any of this stuff, but it was called Medical Civic Action Program, in which doctors would go out into remote villages and hold sick call. And I don't want to say it was a disaster, but it wasn't very effective because there was no security. And because there was no security, there was no continuity of care. You couldn't, we felt, that if you tell people you're going to be here at a certain time, you're setting them up to be attacked. That was the MedCap program. So I'll have to say, I'll tell you a story. When I graduated from medical school, uh, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure where I wanted to go, what to be. But I knew one thing. I didn't want to be a pediatrician because it was boring. It was just growth and development, and it was mostly scut work. And um, truth be told, for the national board exams, I only passed the pediatric section by 1 point. That 1 point determined whether or not I was going to be a doctor. So I get to Vietnam, and I am assigned to a combat engineer battalion. And I go in and introduce myself to the commander. And the commander said, the last doctor had an interest in pediatrics. And they, at the provincial hospital, they built a pediatric unit, which was basically a concrete building with tile floors. That was basically it. And I would like you to continue his mission. Crap. But what I ended up doing was because, and it was luckily that I was in an engineer battalion. because it was sort of an anachronism that I would be a medical officer in an engineer battalion because they were scattered all over the place. Our mission was sanctuary denial, which means knocking down trees on either side of a military supply route so that we don't get ambushed, and mine clearing. And we had people all over the place. And what was I going to do? I was just going to hold sick call in the morning, but all the action took place away from our base camp. So I was able to go down to the hospital uh, almost every day. Continuity of care. The interesting thing was that one thing we were able to set up was that people who had sick children in a village could come to the hospital. So why would we send civil affairs officers to a village where it's so unsecure that you can't announce your arrival? Why not transport people that needed to be seen in the village to the provincial hospital? And why use US Army resources when we had Republic of Vietnam assets? So my only contribution to the program was to set up a situation that before people needed to be admitted to the hospital, they would come down for screening and treatment. And out of that, we would select people who needed hospitalization. So that was Vietnam. It is no thanks to me that that program was a success because it is thanks to the medical officer who preceded me, who actually had an interest in pediatrics, and a commander who who had a heart for taking care of people as well as carrying out his military mission. So after Vietnam, the Army was not a happy place because basically we lost the war. And it was very unhappy. We were making the transition from a conscript army to an all volunteer army. And as I was telling Ken and Don earlier in the meeting, that I personally like the idea of an army reflecting the population it protects. But conscripts are terrible soldiers. And I really welcomed the volunteer part of the Army. So in 1977, when they said my next assignment would be Germany, in between I did a pediatric residency in the Army and everything else, but let's jump ahead. I said, I think I'll go into the reserves. And at that point, I married up with a civil affairs unit and learned about civil affairs. So during that time, as the Army was reinventing itself, civil affairs, at least our unit, was assigned to Europe, NATO. And we spent our time, one, mapping hospitals, schools, everything that you don't want to have destroyed unless you absolutely positively need to have that done so that we don't run into a Gaza situation. And that was what we were doing. The second mission that we had was that we interfaced with the host country, which for our unit was sometimes Germany and sometimes the Netherlands. And if I'm not boring you, the battle plan for the Cold War was that should Russia advance, they would come through what was called the Fulda Gap in southern Germany. They would also come through in northern Germany, but that was under the Brits and the French. So ours was the Fulda Gap. And the forces in Germany was there to hold them off long enough that we can transport everybody over there and engage a full battle. So we would run these exercises, and they were called reforger exercises. Stands for Return Forces to Germany. And we were billeted with either Germans or Dutch soldiers, and we managed under a war game. It was basically a war game, uh, bringing soldiers or bringing military equipment or assets through either Rotterdam or Antwerp, and playing the game. Well, this military supply route you can't use, and we have a bunch of civilians down here, and what do you do with those? And that was how we spent the late 70s. Once we had the Army reconstructed, we needed to try it out. That's where Grenada comes in. Let's see, October 1983, Grenada. It was a 4-day war. We were responding to the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, excuse me for having to read this, which gave us an appeal to intervene in an autocracy in Grenada, and the pretext was the safety of 600 medical students that were there, and this was President Reagan's term, and so that was easy. I mean, we just rolled it up. Well, that worked. I mean, it's an island. So the next trial turned out to be Panama, 1989. And the purpose was to depose General Manuel Noriega, who was wanted in the United States for drug trafficking. It ran from 20 December 1989 to late January 1990. So it was right after Christmas I got called up for Panama. And we reported at Fort Bragg. They invaded. It went very well, except for one small neighborhood in Panama City called El Chorrillo. And that neighborhood was basically trashed. So we used civil affairs assets to reconstruct that, but my job was to go around that area of Panama, around Panama City and environs, assessing the clinics and the medical infrastructure and making corrections as we needed to. It was very simple, but it worked. And it concluded 28 January 1990, and I came home on the 30th of January 1990. And 6 months later, Iraq invaded Kuwait. Now we're to the talk. Persian Gulf War I consisted of two aspects. Operation Desert Shield, August 1990 to January 1991, was an American-led coalition, the largest since World War II, and it was to protect the global supply of oil and allegedly protect sacred Islamic sites. But it was mostly to protect Saudi Arabia so they could continue supplying oil. And I remember at the time, there was some dissent with some people saying, well, we're only going to invade Kuwait because it's about the oil. Well, of course it was about the oil. Are you daft? I mean, our economy, for good or ill, oil is the lifeblood of that economy. And we didn't want it in control of Iraq. Operation Desert Storm was 17 January 91 to 28 February 91. I was medical director of the Allegan County Health Department at the time, and there was a secretary, and her son had gone into the Army, and he had just finished his basic training and his parachute qualification and his advanced infantry training, and he was in that reactive force that was protecting Saudi Arabia. And she was really concerned that her son would be in a war. And I said, don't worry. I said, there won't be a war unless somebody calls me. You know, I mean, what a stupid thing to say. I mean, I can't even believe I said it. 2 days later, they called me. And so right after Christmas again, I was assigned to the 432nd Civil Affairs Battalion in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And they're wonderful people, let me tell you. They really watched out for us. And we married up with them, got acquainted with them, flew down to Fort Bragg. And I have to say that Desert Storm, it was anticipated by many to be a bloodbath. And there were people who were saying, well, the Iraqis for their defense are going to fill trenches full of oil and light it on fire, and they're going to use biological warfare, and they have a 500,000 man army, and they have all this artillery, and so the tension was high. Our training as civil affairs people down there was two parts, the physical and the intellectual. Uh, our mission had been Northern Europe. We now had to learn everything there was about Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Iraq and Arabian culture and Islam. Plus the fact that we needed to be physically ready for whatever came insofar as a war. So I don't know if you saw. It fell asleep. Well, oh God, did you guys? I hope it's the only thing that fell asleep. Oh, there you go. So at this point, civil affairs is becoming part of the Special Operations Command. And most civil affairs units at that time still carried over that old military government idea. They had a public health officer. They had a legal team with a JAG officer. They had a military police. They had construction. That was the old thing. But they were going into special operations. And special operations consists of the special forces, PSYOPs, and civil affairs. And one of the reasons, unfortunately, that I got called a lot was because I was one of the few um, doctors who had public health experience and was airborne qualified. So that's the current patch, and that was the patch that I wore over there. So let us go to here. Whoops. Let's go to there. Yes. So here's the plan. The plan is this is Kuwait, this is Iraq, this is Saudi Arabia. Marines would go directly from here into Kuwait City. The bulk of the forces would be transferred surreptitiously up here and around and attack Iraqi forces coming out of Kuwait. I don't know, it's been a long time since Desert Storm, but Colin Powell said, when asked, what are we going to do? He said about the Iraqi army, we're going to cut off its head and then we're going to kill it. That was the strategy. Most of the casualties in Desert Storm occurred during Desert Shield when they were trying to run all this equipment up at night along these barely platted out roads through the desert to get ready for the killing it part. Oh, so what else did we do at Fort Bragg? Well, we had physical conditioning, and of course, we had to do a simulation of a combat jump. So that was that. Now maybe I can do some slides. PT training, MOP, yeah. Because of the risk of biological warfare, we needed to get anthrax shots, and at that time, anthrax vaccine was a little shaky. And so we had, especially our female personnel, had some concerns about fertility and things like that. And so we said, okay, you don't have to do that. You can be stationed over here. We practiced in what you would call a gas mask. It's called a protective mask. And we started at the beginning of the day. We did PT, we did everything, and we wore the mask all day, just getting ready for what we thought was going to happen. So let's see if the pic. Well, no. Or okay. I'm trying to go forward, Andy. Thank you. Now I'm going back. Thank you. Okay, that's me at Fort Bragg. The my younger self. Uh, Forward, forward, forward. There. Okay. So my patients, they sent me cards. Good for them. There's the Iraqi flag, the Saudi flag, some people there, the Kuwaiti flag. I taped them all up, Panamanian flag. And here they are again. And this one says, "Dear Dr. Ohmart, I hope you don't get killed." And and I thought that was a nice sentiment. Thank you, Justin. I too hope I don't get killed. Um, these are just pictures. They don't necessarily advance the narrative, as I said before. This is us getting onto a C-141 with some of our equipment to go across, refueling in Spain, and landing at King Abdulaziz Airfield outside of Al-Jabar, where the planes were taking off to bomb Iraqi positions in Iraq and Kuwait. Ah, look, the happy soldier in a five-star hotel. This is in Saudi Arabia. And we were the boots on the ground for civil affairs, but we were meeting with Kuwaiti government in exile in this hotel. And it was a nice experience because we had good food and we were living in Kobar Towers. Have you ever heard of Kobar Towers? The Air Force lost some people there from a terrorist attack, like in the early 1990s. Uh, so this was a happy time, and we had scuds that would pretend to, scare us. So we had these scud missiles coming down, but there it was safe. It was nice. Okay, we're going to jump ahead real quick. Um, not as quick as you. I know, I know, I know. Wait, 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 wait. I got this. I got this. Um, so what we have here is the Marines are right there, and we are right behind the Marine Corps. And the jump off was 2 a.m. for them. And as soon as they got here and liberated the outskirts, we were to move in and set up. And we were set up in a library warehouse, had books and everything like that at the airport in Kuwait, preparing to start our operations. Okay, I need to go forward, 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 forward. And that's us lined up in CAF G, waiting for the uh, signal to go. The other thing that happened a few weeks before was the Iraqis set all the oil fields afire. I don't know if you remember that. And that was annoying. And a lot of what you may see here is a picture are pictures of the air pollution. And and I wasn't aware how boring these slides were until I gave them to Andy to set up because it reminded me of my dad. My dad had to take a trip to California. He took it on the train and he was so impressed with the countryside. He came back with a whole bunch of pictures of desert taken through a train window, And that's the way I feel about some of this stuff that's here. This is the outskirts of Kuwait City. This is the air pollution and the desert. Okay, and now we are beginning to enter the outskirts of Kuwait City. I'll make not too long work over this. More desert, more pollution, more desert pollution, desert pollution. There's an oil well fire. Iraqi artillery emplacement still going into Kuwait City, oil well fires, medevac, smoke. Ah, here we are. This is a naval hospital. Um, and it was set up in the middle of the desert because we were expecting beaucoup casualties, lots of casualties. There it is, all set up, all dressed up, no place to go. They sat out there in the desert, they packed up, they went home. There it is again, along with the smoke, or present smoke. And now we start running into some wartime scenes here. These are destroyed vehicles, probably Iraqis trying to get out of the city. There's the beach. Okay, I'm in a chopper now over an oil well fire. And there's some Iraqi vehicles abandoned. There's another Iraqi vehicle abandoned. There's the inside of an Iraqi armored vehicle. And there, the highway of death. This is where we came in to destroy. When they said cut off the head and kill it, this is the killing it part. In that chopper, you could smell death. And now a closer look. And that was the end of that. But our job was just beginning. So as we got into Kuwait City, we ran into a bunch of people celebrating. This is a Saudi APC, and this is another Saudi APC, a convoy coming through. And there were celebrations, and there were traffic jams all over the place, as we are caught in one. Because what was my job? Easier. My job, when the 432nd wrote their after action report, they said of their medical team, remember, I'm just one team amongst others in this battalion, that our team made sure the clinics had water. We provided a generator to a hospital, and we fed the animals at the zoo. The last one is actually correct. So trying to get around Kuwait City to check on all the clinics, that was the getting around was the chore. The Kuwaiti government had plenty of supplies. All they needed to know was who needed what where. And the Kuwaitis who were left were less than helpful. And I'll tell you why. Because they had foreign workers doing everything for them. Filipinos, Iraqis, everybody. They just hired people. And they didn't know, if they knew where the water tank was in their clinic, they didn't know how much water was in there. They didn't know anything about the energy sources, nothing. So we ended up crawling up onto the roofs, trying to check each water tank and seeing what they needed. But it got done. Let's see if I can advance this again. Yes, yes, okay, caught in another traffic jam. But the hospitals came first. So we did the hospitals first to see what they needed. Well, um, the war didn't last long enough for them to really run out of anything. And the supplies were immediately available. The hospitals were in really great shape. It was basically walk in, say hello, don't need anything. The neighborhood clinics is where we needed to go. More scenes. There's the iconic monuments. That's like the Seattle Space Needle. That's the Kuwaiti version. And apartments as we go around. And oil well fires. And a mansion burned out. I have to say that all war zones look the same, especially in an urban environment. I don't mean to be blasé, but after a while, they all look the same. A gun emplacement, more smoke. another mansion, and a disabled Iraqi tank, and a non-disabled tank, another victory parade out in the desert. That's a soccer field, the beach, and a gun emplacement, barbed wire, artillery piece, the incompatibility of war with children's toys. And this is us. This is Art Truss, and he was the commander of our team. He's a veterinarian from Kalamazoo, and me, and we're just sitting, taking a break. I'll tell you about Art. For some reason, he was fixated on getting Kentucky Fried Chicken. I mean, it's weird what people fixate on when they're doing stuff. And the whole time he wanted, oh, I hope I can get some Kentucky Fried Chicken. I have to tell you, we were in Kuwait City a month and we just ate MREs. That was it. And there were no showers or anything. So it could be, Kentucky Fried Chicken. It could be worse. So there's a mosque and that. And like I said, oh, there's the original city gate of ancient Kuwait City when it was a trading nation and they fished and got scallops. And there is another Saudi armor column, and there is a fire. There was a story about an American sergeant who tried to extinguish, actually, he did extinguish one of these fires. And he put on like an overcoat, he had people spraying with water, and he would run past the oil well and he would do one twist. And then he would walk around and he'd get on, they spray him down with water. He ran through, did another twist. And he did that until the fire went out. But mostly we had to wait until people from Texas came in who knew how to extinguish oil well fires. This is deep into it now. And that is, the license plates. The Iraqis turned Kuwait into a province. And so they made everybody replace their license plate. This is the number, and this says Iraq, and this says Kuwait. And as soon as they were liberated, they dumped the license plates. I brought one home with me. Emplacement on the beach, yada, yada. Go, go, go. I'm boring myself. Oh, I took this picture. This is midday. This is the smoke. And I took this picture because of the flag that this Humvee is flying. It has a background of blue and a yellow M on it. It's a University of Michigan. They were flying a University of Michigan flag off of their Hummer. So I had to take a picture of it. Okay, well, sometimes you go to a clinic to find out what's happening, and you find it's full of Iraqi prisoners. And so they were being held by just Iraqis, like not even military Iraqis. They were just rounded up and put in this clinic. So part of our job, in addition to making sure they had enough water, was to help clear these guys out and get them under proper circumstances. Everybody was gassing up because gas was free. Okay, here is our interpreter, Waleed, and he helped us navigate Kuwait City. But I'll tell you how he helped us navigate Kuwait City. The Kuwaitis hated the Iraqis, and yet the Iraqis were a prominent part of Kuwait. They worked there before the war. They were all right. Everything was covered. But they hated the Iraqis. So it took us a couple days to find out that our interpreter was steering us away from the areas in Kuwait City that had housed or were housing Iraqis, steering us away to not look at their clinics, steering us away to see, we're one of the missions, unsaid mission of civil affairs is intelligence. Because we're in contact with the civilian population, we pick up things. And we weren't able to pick up well, we wouldn't have been able to pick up things if we hadn't glommed on to the fact that our interpreter was steering us away from those areas that he did not want us to help or get involved with. Hmm. So, students holding pictures of President Bush, the smart one. This is a French unit we ran into, and this is where we lived. That's my friend Art coming back. We had no showers. We had a standpipe and a drain. We shaved out of a canteen cup, and we would do what my mom would have called spit baths, you know. And we stacked up cartons of books to sort of make private areas for ourselves. And this is Art coming back from washing up. This is one of the guys. That's how we lived, and that's where I think I lived. I think that's me with a poncho cover, and that's Art riding home, and another one playing cards. Because let me tell you, once you got this done, and you have a whole army waiting there, you can't just pack up and leave. It takes a while, and there was a lot of downtime once we figured out that most everything we needed to do was already done. This is our U.S. ambassador to Kuwait. Uh, some other guy. That is a Saudi promotion party. We were invited to a Saudi promotion party. So while we were sitting around, um, we were called that a guy wanted to meet us. We went to meet this guy, civilian, a middle-aged American. He had a valise. He opened the valise, and it was stacks of $100 bills. And he was from an organization called Save the Animals. Save the Animals. That was where they got the fact that we fed the animals in the zoo. And his request was we take this USAID Jeep down to Riyadh and buy animal feed and arrange to have it shipped up to the Kuwait City Zoo. That was it. So, leave that out of it. We got into this Jeep, which had, it's about 100+ miles from where we were to Riyadh. And the Jeep had a monitor on it that would beep if we went over 50. So we rolled down the windows and turned up the radio. And we got down there and we met with this guy who was supposed to be a purveyor of hay. And he said, "Let me show you the hay." Okay, let's go see the hay. And he leads us into this showroom, and there's a bale of hay. And we say, do you think maybe we could see a little bit more of what the quality is that you have? He said, "Oh, it's all like this. It's like that." Well, we had no recourse but to sign up for that. And we arranged the transportation. And going back to another place where we had to go, there it was. I mean, it was a mirage, glowing in the sun. Kentucky Fried Chicken. There it was. Go into the parking lot. Get out. There are different lines. We take the shorter line. Stand in line, waiting for Kentucky Fried Chicken. The police come in, tap us on the shoulder. They say, "You have to leave." Why? Because we were standing in the line reserved for women and children. We weren't in the men's line. And it was so close, yet so far. My friend's Kentucky Fried Chicken. Hope I'm not using up too much time here. This is the Saudi promotion party, yada, yada. And, huh? 10 minutes to go, or did I use? This was the feast. And there we are, and that's lamb and rice, and you dig into it with your hands. And there is an art to doing that, which we know. Um, there was a colonel who I wasn't too fond of, and I was sitting close to him, and he said, because whatever, what is this? And the Saudi officer said, that is sheep's lung. And I said, Colonel Wilson loves sheep's lung. No, 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 no. Oh, yeah, please shovel them over there. The hookah? Of course, you can see the patch, and I'll tell you why the patch is important later on. It's not really important, but I'll tell you about it later. More hookah, yada, yada. Ah, this is the supplying generator to the hospital. We didn't supply a generator to the hospital. They wanted to get this operation over before Ramadan. It had to be done before Ramadan. So Ramadan started, Kuwait had been liberated, and now it's time for Ramadan and the evening feast after each day's fasting. And they had a ship come in from Australia with all these sheep. And there was no power to operate the slaughterhouse. And so people were buying their lamb for the evening meal, taking it home, and slaughtering it in their alley. And it was creating a big public health problem. We had entrails and skin and all kinds of stuff just piling up. So one thing we needed to do was get them a generator so we can operate this slaughterhouse and clean up the streets. So we took our MP brothers to clean up the streets. And oh, okay, this is an effigy. It's not a real person, but it's supposed to be an Iraqi and what you would do to somebody who was an Iraqi. So there's the slaughterhouse. Ah, and here we go. So we found a generator at an Iraqi silkworm missile site, and we enlisted the Texas National Guard helicopter to pick it up and take it down to the power, um, uh, the slaughterhouse, so it could be hooked up to the power. And that was that. Tri-power, courtesy, Texas Air National Guard. Yeah, okay. So now you know the war is over because the politicians are coming in. So that's Dick Gebhardt, who was, I think he was chairman of the House Committee of Defense or whatever, and Les Aspin from Wisconsin, because this was his unit, you know. And so they fed us a big steak dinner, and we had the people come in. There's our commander. There's Art Truss eating his steak. There's me enjoying my steak. And this could be the end, because here is all the equipment we have to send back to the United States. So this is all washing and getting everything ready to go back home. Except we weren't going home. Because what had happened was, while all of this was going on, Saddam attacked the Kurds because he had a thing with the Kurds. The Kurds supported people he didn't like. And he started to almost like a genocide in northern Iraq. So when President Bush declared a no-fly zone, our job was to go and find the Iraqis in the villages that had fled to the mountains, provide for them, and bring them back to their homes. So we weren't going home. We flew to Incirlik, Turkey, where we have an Air Force base. We took a bus to through along the Syrian border to northern Iraq, and we crossed over into Zakho, which was welcome to Zakho, and that was where we are. It reminded me of South Dakota. So our job was to set up a refugee camp here from scratch and get people in and prepare the villages for them to go back in. So now the slides may get slightly repetitive. This is it. This is our job. Make a refugee camp out of this. So start by planning it out. And there we are. Helicopters coming in. Now we're going up into the mountains. Then these are the Kurds that had fled to the mountains. There'll probably be more of these slides than you need to see, so I'll just zip through them because the idea was the special forces guys would organize the Kurds in the mountains and their transport, and we would organize the camps. So we organized the camps, and each camp unit became a square, and each square had a number of families in it, and each square elected a chief, for want of a better word, to represent them at the meetings we would have. So people flooded in from all over. Here's the committee, German emergency doctors, and they came in to provide help. And there they are doing an airdrop of food to Iraqis in the or Kurds in the mountains. Another airdrop. And this is us in the mountains. We were up there coordinating with the SF guys. And there, more Kurds, more mountains. And there is the ghost town of Zakho, completely cleared out. And that is their empty clinic. And that's their trashed clinic. That's them in the mountains. There is that. I don't know. I wasn't there to take a narrative, so there isn't one. So there is the camp. Uh, we're getting the supplies. Our job ended up being coordinated the services of all these volunteers that appeared out of the woodwork, like the German emergency doctors and this French unit that was nutrition for infants. And that's another French guy with this group. And there was a British naval unit there, and they established a maternal health clinic. And there was the International Rescue Committee, and they were there. And there was an Air Force medical unit there. She was a cardiologist, and this medic, the Air Force deployed them to this refugee camp. They're the Air Force people. And he's sitting around talking to the Air Force people. And me back in Turkey. Turkey was our main supply point. It was Salopi. Salopi, Turkey was just across the river from Iraq. And they're the Sisters of Salopi. That was an army hospital, and they were nurses at the army hospital. They called themselves the Sisters of Salopi. And that was our living conditions. Again, no showers, but it was a fuel can with water or a water can. And there's the Tigris River. And more Tigris River. And people washing vehicles in the Tigris, and an ancient bridge over the Tigris, and the air base, Air Force, the airport, and planting, and this and this. I'm boring myself. Finally, we're here. Because the whole purpose of this was to get it up and running and turn it over to the UN. And the significance of this slide is the UN flag. And the significance of this slide is the ceremony that is turning the camp over to the UN from us. And this is us going home. Thank you. Okay. Viola.
So the question I have is, it seems implicit to me, but maybe I'm wrong. You have doctors like yourself with various specialties. You mentioned the cardiologist, yourself a pediatrician. But once you're over there, do you kind of take on all tasks, or how did that work?
It worked that way. And thank you for reminding me, because lessons learned. Lessons learned. You don't need a medical doctor climb up on the roof of a clinic to see if the tank has water in it. You just don't need that kind of asset. So civil affairs got revamped after that, and they have civil affairs teams now that are just civil affairs, and they assess what's needed. They still have doctors and lawyers and things like that, but they're at the brigade level and they're consultants only. Because, like you said, and like you know, why would you have an MD doing the stuff we did? You know, especially like coordinating services in a refugee camp. Anybody can do that. You don't need an MD degree to do that. Huh? Well, nobody. But I mean, this is a lesson learned going forward. I mean, each experience is a lesson learned, and hopefully we apply those lessons. And sometimes we don't. Like in Vietnam, we had civil affairs, we didn't deploy them, you know? And you always end up fighting the last wars. That's what they say. Okay. Thank you. Bob.
Hey, it
Bob.
seems as though this seems disorganized, or from what you talked about, that you kind of went in there and flew by the seat of your
That's
pants.
exactly what we do. That's exactly what civil affairs does. That you make it up as you go along. You're away from the flagpole, you see the need, and you just paste things together. And that's what I loved about the job. You're making something out of nothing.
Dave, my my uncle was in military police in Europe at the end of World War II, well, throughout World War II. But um, I think that the civil affairs, what passed for civil affairs at that time, was under the aegis of the military police because he was military police. He said he went along really with the advanced troops um, and trying to organize the civil society.
Yeah.
What remained of it, that was his job, and he was a first lieutenant commissioned in the field. That was a really wonderful man. But he was close enough that one time he went into a camp uh, and he ended up capturing Hans Frank, the butcher of Poland.
Hmm.
And of course, when they found out that, he was relieved of all command and told to accompany this person for purposes of chain of command identification. But Hans Frank, once he got back to headquarters, never denied who he was.
Okay.
So then he was released to go back to that, and he was ended up in Czechoslovakia. And I remember he told me that he was specifically told to not disperse our assets, but he said it was really cold, and it was in March, and so he had all these blankets, and so he instructed his men to throw them off the truck.
Sure.
And then what happened was they were all picked up by black marketers who then sold it. And of course he got reamed out for that. He said lesson learned. So, but I think it was under the military police.
Okay.
Thank you. What did you learn about lessons learned about engagements in which we need to be there and engagements in which we don't? If anything.
Nothing more than what you already know. You know what engagements we should be involved in and which engagements we shouldn't. I hope that's a satisfactory answer, but I mean, come on, we all know we should know what's going on enough to answer what should we really be involved in. I'm going to avoid it that way.
So,
Thank you. Yay. Oh,